Nobody notices it at first. It's not a canal carved by human hands. It's not a megastructure shown in documentaries. There are no grand gates, no concrete walls, no engineering marvels to admire. It is simply a narrow, almost invisible stretch of water between two pieces of land most Americans can't find on a map. Yet, this small gap, this thin line of blue on the edge of Southeast Asia, quietly controls the future of the entire Indo-Pacific. It is the lifeline of China, the leverage of India, the fear of Japan, the concern of Europe, and the silent battlefield of the United States. This is the Strait of Malacca, and if it ever closes, Asia falls. Imagine a place so narrow that a single grounded ship could block it. A place so essential that one disruption, a storm, an accident, a conflict, could freeze nearly half the world's trade. A place where oil tankers squeeze through waters so tight that pirates, navies, and submarines watch them with equal interest. A place where the ambitions of China collide with the strategies of America, where India waits quietly, where Singapore rises as a tiny giant, and where Indonesia and Malaysia hold power they rarely use. Now imagine this. Every barrel of oil China needs to survive. Every ton of iron ore Japan needs to build. Every microchip, every container, every supply chain that keeps Asia alive. All of it passes through this single strait. If Malacca stops, Asia stops. If Asia stops, the world stops. This is the hook. The Strait of Malacca is the most overlooked point of failure in the global economy, and it is the one place where the next great power struggle might silently begin. At its narrowest point, Malacca is just 1.7 miles wide. That's less than the distance between two New York City blocks. Yet through this tiny passage flows almost 1/3 of the world's trade. As ships line up to enter, their hulls glide through waters shallow enough that many vessels scrape close to the seabed. The captains know they have little room for error. A misstep could mean disaster. A single accident could trigger chaos far beyond the horizon. And it has happened before. Not long ago, a tanker drifted off course and blocked part of the strait. The world barely noticed, because it didn't last long. But behind closed doors, military analysts panicked. If the blockage had lasted days instead of hours, Asia's supply chains would have ruptured. Fuel shortages would have begun within a week. Manufacturing lines would have ground to a halt. The price of goods in American stores would have risen almost overnight. And unlike the Suez Canal or the Panama Canal, Malacca is not man-made. It cannot be managed, widened, or upgraded. It is a natural choke point, fixed by geography. A bottleneck carved by the earth itself. A bottleneck surrounded by nations whose alliances shift like tides. To understand why Malacca matters, you must understand who fears it most. China calls this vulnerability the Malacca Dilemma. It is one of the greatest fears of the Chinese government, a fear spoken quietly but planned for obsessively. 80% of China's imported oil passes through this strait. Without it, China's economy suffocates. Factories stop. Power grids flicker, military operations stall. A nation of 1.4 billion slows under the weight of energy starvation. For China, Malacca is not just a strait, it is a chokehold, a weakness, a nightmare. And the Chinese government knows exactly who could close that chokehold: the United States Navy. With bases in Japan, Guam, Singapore, and Diego Garcia, the U.S. Navy surrounds the Indo-Pacific like a ring. In wartime, American submarines could position themselves at the entrance of Malacca and halt tanker traffic with frightening ease. Even the threat alone gives Washington enormous leverage in any crisis. It's no accident that every Chinese strategic report mentions Malacca. It's no accident China is building pipelines through Myanmar, ports in Pakistan, railways across Asia, and artificial islands in the South China Sea. All of these projects, the Belt and Road Initiative, the militarization of reefs, the push into the Indian Ocean, are attempts to escape the vulnerability of Malacca. Because China knows, if America wants to strangle its economy, it won't need a war. It will only need to touch Malacca. India sees it differently. For India, Malacca is not a weakness, it is an opportunity. India sits on the western side of the strait, closer to the entrance than China. From the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, India has a front row seat, and from there, it can monitor every ship that enters. Indian strategists quietly call the islands unsinkable aircraft carriers. If conflict ever comes, India could close the strait too. Japan and South Korea see Malacca with dread. Almost all their energy passes through it. Their survival depends on its openness. Every day that oil flows, their economies breathe. Every day it stops, their power grids shiver. This is why Japan invests in Indonesia and Malaysia. This is why Japanese PMS travel to Singapore so often. Their future passes through Malacca. Singapore, meanwhile, owes its existence to this strait. It is the guardian of the Southern Gate, a tiny island that became a global giant by controlling trade. Singapore's wealth, navy, and diplomacy all revolve around one truth. As long as Malacca flows, Singapore thrives. Indonesia and Malaysia hold the land around it. Too often ignored by Western analysts, these two countries possess something no superpower can replicate: geographic authority. Without their cooperation, no alliance can control the strait. Without their stability, the world trembles. So, what makes Malacca dangerous? Not war, not pirates, not weather. What makes Malacca dangerous is how many nations depend on it, and how many nations have the power to disrupt it. The world's most essential shipping lane lies between states that must constantly balance fear, ambition, diplomacy, and pressure from larger powers. It is a region where American influence competes with Chinese economic power, where India asserts its interests, where Japan offers investment, where Russia seeks access, and where smaller nations must navigate the tides of diplomacy. This is not a battlefield of tanks and missiles. It is a battlefield of influence, alliances, leverage, and silence. But the most dangerous scenario is one few people talk about. What happens if the Strait of Malacca becomes too dangerous or too vulnerable to rely on? What happens if a conflict in the South China Sea pushes traffic away? What happens if piracy surges again? What happens if a ship intentionally blocks the strait? What happens if a new form of warfare, cyber, sabotage, autonomous naval drones, targets the choke point? What happens if the world's most important artery becomes too risky to use? The consequences would be immediate and catastrophic. China's economy would suffer within days. Japan's factories would shut down. Korea's tech industry would freeze. India's trade would stall. Singapore's ports would go silent. Oil prices would skyrocket. The global supply chain, already fragile, would snap. So the world quietly prepares alternatives. China's pipelines through Myanmar, China's port in Pakistan, Thailand's proposal to dig a new canal across the Kra Isthmus, India's attempts to strengthen control over the Indian Ocean, America's military watchfulness, Japan's alliances, Australia's partnerships, Indonesia's modernization, Singapore's strategic investments. Every nation has a plan, every nation fears the same future. But here's the twist. None of the alternatives can replace Malacca. Pipelines can't match the flow of oil. Overland rail is too slow. New canals are too expensive and politically explosive. Even climate change, which opens the Arctic, will not be enough for decades. For the foreseeable future, the Strait of Malacca remains the beating heart of Asian trade. Which brings us to the moment that truly defines this strait. The fact that it is a choke point for everyone, yet controlled by no single power. That is the paradox. That is the danger. That is why Malacca is a silent fuse that, if lit, could trigger a regional or even global crisis. For the United States, Malacca is leverage. For China, it is a vulnerability. For India, it is a strategic gateway. For Japan, it is oxygen. For Singapore, it is life. For Indonesia and Malaysia, it is bargaining power. For Europe, it is necessity. For the Middle East, it is a highway. For the world, it is a reminder. Globalization is fragile. Trade is fragile. Stability is fragile. And geography always wins. The Strait of Malacca is a narrow doorway between peace and crisis. And history has shown us that doorways do not stay quiet forever. If one day this strait is blocked, by accident, by conflict, or by design, the shock will not be regional. It will be global. The kind of shock that reshapes alliances, triggers military responses, and forces nations to make decisions they are not prepared to make. And that is why Malacca matters. Not because ships pass through it, but because the world passes through it. If you enjoy documentaries like this about geopolitics, history, and global strategy, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The next episode will cover a choke point even more sensitive and dangerous than the Strait of Malacca.